Kelrath stood at the docking port and watched the massive station rotate slowly against the stars. His slender fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted his translation device. This was his first assignment outside Vexian space, and the weight of it pressed down on his narrow shoulders. The harmonious dawn had brought him here after 3 weeks of travel, and now he was about to meet humans for the first time. The airlock hissed open, and Kelrath stepped through. The human section of the station looked different from what he expected. The corridors were wider and the gravity felt heavier. His legs ached after just a few steps. A tall figure approached him, and Kelrath had to tilt his head back to see the human's face. Commander Jake Morrison extended his hand and smiled. Kelrath knew this gesture from his briefings and carefully placed his own hand in the human's grip. The warmth surprised him. So did the strength, even though Jake was clearly being gentle. The human's hand could probably crush his bones without much effort. Kelrath pushed that thought away and returned the smile. Jake led him through the station and talked about the layout. His voice was deep and friendly. Kelrath noticed how other humans nodded at Jake as they passed. Some smiled at Kelrath with genuine curiosity in their eyes. One young woman with short blonde hair waved enthusiastically. Jake introduced her as Lieutenant Claire Hudson from the engineering section. She shook Kelrath's hand with the same careful strength and asked if he needed anything. The mess hall was busy when they arrived. Humans sat at tables eating and laughing. The noise level was higher than Kelrath was used to. On Vexian ships, everyone spoke in measured tones and kept conversations private. Here the humans seemed to share everything with everyone. Their laughter rolled across the room in waves. Jake guided him to a table where 2 other humans waited. Dr. Amy Foster was a biologist with kind eyes and dark hair tied back in a simple style. She immediately began asking Kelrath questions about Vexian physiology. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Kelrath found himself relaxing. The other human was Lieutenant Peter Hayes. He was quieter than the others. His eyes moved constantly around the room, but not in a nervous way. More like he was always aware of everything happening around him. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured. Jake brought something he called coffee. The liquid was dark and steam rose from the cup. Kelrath sniffed it carefully. The smell was bitter and sharp. He took a small sip, and his face must have shown his reaction because all 3 humans laughed. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that invited him to laugh with them. Amy explained that coffee was an acquired taste and offered him something called juice instead. It was much better. Over the next few days, Kelrath settled into a routine. He observed humans in their work and their rest periods. He took notes on everything. The way they organized their duty shifts, how they settled disputes through discussion rather than formal mediation, their strange customs around food, and how they often ate together even when it was not required. He learned that humans valued something they called teamwork above almost everything else. What struck Kelrath most was how physical humans were. They touched each other constantly. A hand on a shoulder, a pat on the back. They hugged when greeting close friends. His own species rarely touched except in intimate family settings. But humans seemed to need physical contact the way Vexians needed quiet meditation time. Jake took him to the observation deck one evening. They stood looking out at the stars together. The moon below them was marked with craters and had no atmosphere. Jake explained that it reminded him of Earth's moon. He talked about his home planet with obvious affection. He described oceans so deep that the pressure would crush a ship. Mountains that reached into thin air where breathing was difficult, storms that could level entire cities, predators with teeth as long as Kelrath's forearm. Kelrath listened with growing fascination. He knew from reports that Earth was classified as a death world. But hearing Jake describe it with such casual affection made it real in a way the reports had not. Humans had evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill them. Everything about them suddenly made more sense. Their heavy bones and thick muscles, their redundant organs, their incredible immune systems that could fight off most galactic diseases without help. But what puzzled Kelrath was how gentle they were despite all that. Jake could probably tear him apart without much effort, but instead he was patient and kind. Amy got excited about cellular structures and spoke to him as an equal, even though her species had been in space for less than a century. Even Peter, with his watchful eyes and quiet manner, had helped Kelrath fix his datapad when it stopped working. His large fingers had moved with surprising delicacy over the small controls. Kelrath sent his first report back to the Vexian Confederation. He wrote about human curiosity and their eagerness to learn. He noted their strong social bonds and their emphasis on loyalty. He mentioned their physical advantages but concluded that they seemed to be a peaceful species, despite their dangerous origin. The Vexians would probably approve minor trade agreements, perhaps some cultural exchanges. Nothing major. That night, Kelrath lay in his quarters and thought about his sister Marin. She was on a colony ship heading to a new settlement. Her children would grow up under alien stars. He sent her a message describing the humans. He told her about Jake's kindness and Amy's enthusiasm. He said he thought humans would make good neighbors in the galaxy. He had no idea how wrong and right he would turn out to be. The days passed in a comfortable rhythm. Kelrath learned to drink coffee and even started to like it. He learned human games and lost spectacularly at something called chess to a young ensign named Kevin Grant. He attended their briefings and noticed how they made decisions through discussion and consensus. He watched them exercise in their gym and marveled at what they considered normal physical activity. Jake took him to meet more of the crew. There was Greg Porter, who worked in medical. He had gentle hands and a soft voice that probably comforted patients. There was Lisa Chen, who handled communications. Her fingers flew over her console so fast Kelrath could barely follow. There was Danny Wright from security, who told terrible jokes that somehow made everyone laugh anyway. Kelrath started to understand that humans were individuals in a way his species was not. Vexians valued harmony and consensus. They worked to smooth away differences, but humans celebrated their differences. They argued and debated. They held different opinions and seemed to enjoy the clash of ideas. Yet somehow they came together when it mattered. Their loyalty to each other seemed absolute. 3 weeks into his assignment, Kelrath had filled his data logs with observations. He was preparing his second report. He planned to recommend that the Vexian Confederation pursue friendship with humanity. They were unusual, but they seemed honorable. They were strong, but they seemed kind. They would probably be minor players in galactic politics, but they would be reliable allies. He had no way of knowing that everything was about to change, that within hours he would see a side of humanity that would terrify him, that he would learn what it meant when humans said they protected their own, that he would discover why Earth was not just a death world, but a forge that had created something the galaxy had never seen before. The alarm cut through the station like a knife. Kelrath jerked awake in his quarters and his heart hammered in his chest. The lights had shifted to emergency red. His translator crackled with urgent messages in multiple languages. He stumbled out of bed and grabbed his robe. His fingers shook as he tried to fasten it. The corridors were full of people moving with purpose. Humans rushed past him, heading toward the command center. Kelrath followed them, and his legs burned from the heavy gravity. By the time he reached the command center, he was breathing hard. The room was full of activity. Screens showed star maps and ship positions. Senior diplomat Threxus stood at the center console, and his face was ashen. Kelrath pushed through to his superior and grabbed his arm. Threxus turned, and Kelrath saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. The kind Kelrath had only seen once before when their colony on Vex Prime had faced a reactor breach. The Eternal Grace was under attack. The words hit Kelrath like a physical blow. His sister, Marin, and her children were on that ship. Over 2,000 Vexian civilians were on that ship. And the Krell had found them. The main screen showed the colony ship. It was massive and slow, built for comfort, not combat. The Krell ship circled it like predators. 3 warships, each one bristling with weapons, even as Kelrath watched a beam cut into the Eternal Grace's hull. Atmosphere vented in a white plume. Emergency bulkheads would be slamming shut. People would be running. Children would be screaming. Threxes was already trying to negotiate. His voice was steady despite his fear. He offered payment. He offered trade agreements. He offered technology. The Krell commander laughed. The sound came through the speakers and made Kelrath's skin crawl. It was not the laugh of someone amused. It was the laugh of someone who enjoyed causing pain. The Krell wanted the ship. They wanted the colonists. They would take what they wanted and leave nothing behind. That was what Krell did. Everyone in the galaxy knew this. But the Krell had always stayed away from Confederation space before. Something had made them bold. Kelrath tried to call his sister. The connection was chaos. Screaming, alarms, a child crying, then static. He tried again. Nothing. His hands shook so badly he could barely work his communicator. Someone touched his shoulder. He looked up into Jake's face. The human commander had appeared silently. He was not in his casual uniform anymore. He wore something darker, something that looked like it was meant for combat. Other humans were arriving in the command center. All of them were dressed the same way. Amy was there. Peter was there. Even young Kevin Grant was there. Jake spoke quietly to Threxus. Kelrath could not hear what they said, but he saw Threxus shake his head, saw him gesture at the screen. The math was simple. 3 Krell warships against what? The station had no weapons. The Vexian diplomatic ship was not armed. The only military vessel nearby was the human frigate. 1 ship, 48 humans. Jake nodded like he understood. Then he turned to his crew. His voice was not loud, but it carried. Every human in the room looked at him. Some of them were young. Kevin could not be more than 20 standard years. Others were older. Greg had gray in his hair, but they all had the same expression. They were listening. They were ready. Jake said they were going, just like that. No debate, no vote. He said they would not leave people behind. He said it was time to show the Krell why humans did not tolerate bullies. His voice was calm, like he was discussing the weather, like he was not talking about flying 1 small ship against 3 warships. The humans moved. It was like watching a machine activate. Everyone had a task. They moved to complete it without hesitation. Amy grabbed medical supplies. Peter checked weapons. Danny pulled up tactical displays. Lisa opened communication channels. They moved around each other like they had practiced this 1,000 times. Kelrath grabbed Jake's arm. The human stopped and looked down at him. Kelrath tried to explain, tried to make him understand. The Krell were bigger, stronger, more experienced. 1 human ship could not win. It was suicide. It was throwing away their lives for nothing. Jake put his hand on Kelrath's hand. The human's skin was warm. His grip was gentle but firm. He said they knew the odds. He said they were going anyway. He said that if Kelrath wanted to see his sister again, this was the only chance. Then he did something that confused Kelrath completely. He smiled, not a happy smile. Something else. Something that made Kelrath's blood run cold. Threxus tried to stop them. He explained that the Vexian military was on its way. They would arrive in 6 hours. The humans just needed to wait. Jake looked at the screen. At the eternal grace bleeding atmosphere. At the Krell cutting through the hull. He asked how many Vexians would be alive in 6 hours. Threxus had no answer. The humans left. Kelrath watched them go. Watched them board their ship. The Valiant star was not impressive. It was small for a military vessel. Its weapons looked adequate, but nothing special. Its hull was scarred from use. It looked old. It looked tired. It looked like exactly the wrong thing to send against 3 Krell warships. But something made Kelrath move. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the memory of Jake's smile. Maybe it was the way the humans had moved with such certainty. He ran after them. His legs burned. His lungs ached. He caught them at the airlock. Jake tried to wave him off. This was not Kelrath's fight. He should stay safe on the station. But Kelrath pushed forward. He said his sister was on that ship. His family. He said he was coming. Amy stepped forward and put her hand on Jake's shoulder. She said having a Vexian along might help, might calm the civilians if they got there. Jake looked at Kelrath for a long moment. Then he nodded. They gave him a pressure suit. It was too big, made for human proportions, but it would keep him alive if the ship was breached. They strapped him into a seat in the back of the bridge, told him to stay there, told him not to touch anything. Then they forgot about him. They had work to do. The Valiant star detached from the station. Kelrath watched through the viewports as the station fell away. The ship turned and the engines ignited. The acceleration pushed him back into his seat. Humans built for heavy gravity. Their ships reflected that. The force was almost painful. The bridge was quiet. Humans sat at their stations and worked. Fingers moved over controls. Eyes scanned displays. Voices spoke in short, efficient phrases. There was no panic, no fear. Nothing but focus. Jake sat in the command chair and watched everything. His hands rested calmly on the armrests. He could have been sitting in the mess hall. It took 20 minutes to reach the eternal grace. 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. Kelrath watched the tactical display. Watched the 3 red markers that were Krell ships. Watched the blue marker that was the Valiant star. 1 against 3. Insanity. Lisa opened a channel. Jake's voice went out across the void. He identified their ship. He said the Krell had 30 seconds to disengage and leave. His voice was flat. No anger, no threats, just a simple statement. Like he was reading a schedule. The Krell response came back. Laughter, mockery, questions about human stupidity. One of them said they would add the human ship to their collection. Another said they wondered what human flesh tasted like. They thought they were funny. Jake looked at Peter. The lieutenant nodded. Jake looked at Danny. The tactical officer nodded. Jake looked at Kevin. The young weapons officer's hands were steady on his controls. He nodded too. Then Jake said something that Kelrath would remember for the rest of his life. He said weapons free. His voice did not change, did not rise, did not show any emotion. Just 2 words. Weapons free. Like he was giving permission to open a door, not giving the order to start a battle. The Valiant star accelerated. The display showed their speed climbing, numbers that should not be possible. The Krell ships moved to intercept. They fired. Beams of energy cut through space. The human ship dodged, not with computer precision, with something else. Something that looked almost casual. Like Jake knew where the shots would be before they fired. They closed the distance. Not at range, not safe. They charged straight at the Krell. Kelrath gripped his seat and his claws dug into the padding. This was wrong. This was not how space combat worked. You stayed at range. You used your shields. You fired carefully and conserved your ammunition. You did not charge directly at your enemy. But the humans did not seem to know that, or they did not care. The first Krell ship fired everything it had. Energy beams cut through space where the Valiant star had been a moment before. But the human ship was already somewhere else. It rolled and twisted in ways that should have torn it apart. The crew did not even seem concerned. Danny called out numbers. Peter confirmed positions. Jake nodded and gave tiny corrections. Then the humans fired back. Kelrath saw the targeting display. Saw the precision. The Krell ship's engine housing. Not the shields. Not the main hull. The exact point where the engine connected to the power core. The shot hit and fire bloomed in the void. The Krell ship went dark. Dead in space, 1 shot, 1 kill. The second Krell ship came about. It was bigger than the first. Heavier armor, more weapons. It opened up with everything. The space between the ships lit up like a star. The Valiant star's shields flared. Alarms sounded. Amy called out shield status. 60%. 50%. The human ship kept accelerating toward the enemy. Kelrath wanted to scream at them to pull back. To break off, to run. But the humans were focused. Kevin's hands moved over his controls. He was not just firing. He was choosing his targets with care. Another shot. This one hit the Krell ship's communications array. Then another. The weapon systems. Each hit was precise. Surgical. Like a doctor cutting away disease. The Krell ship tried to ram them. It was a desperate move. But Jake saw it coming. The human commander's eyes were locked on the display. He spoke 1 word. Danny responded immediately. The Valiant star dove. Not the gentle turn of a normal ship. A hard maneuver that made Kelrath's stomach drop. They went under the Krell ship. Close enough that Kelrath could see the hull details on the visual feed. Close enough that he could see the weapon ports and the armor plating, and the alien writing on its side. Then they were past. Kevin fired again. The shot hit the Krell ship's command section, right where the bridge would be. The ship's running lights flickered. It started to drift. Not destroyed, but crippled. Unable to fight 2 ships down in less than 5 minutes. Kelrath's mind could not process it. This was not possible. 1 small frigate could not defeat 2 warships. The math did not work. The odds did not work. Nothing worked. Except the humans were doing it anyway. The third Krell ship turned to run. Kelrath saw it on the display, saw its engines flare as it tried to accelerate away. Part of him felt relief. The fight was over. The humans had won. They could rescue the Eternal Grace now. But Jake's voice cut through his thoughts. Cold, final. He told Lisa to send a message. Tell them they had 1 chance to surrender. Just 1. The Krell captain responded with curses and threats. Said he would return with reinforcements. Said he would hunt humans across the galaxy. Said he would make them pay. Jake's face did not change. He nodded to Kevin. The young weapons officer locked on target. The shot was perfect. It hit the Krell ship's engine core. The ship exploded in a ball of fire that faded quickly in the vacuum. No escape pods launched. No survivors. The bridge was silent. Kelrath sat in his seat and shook. Not from fear. From something else. From the realization of what he had just seen. The humans had not fought like civilized species. They had not tried to disable and capture. They had not negotiated or postured. They had simply destroyed anything that threatened them. Efficiently. Coldly. Completely. Amy broke the silence. She said they had casualties. One of the shield generators had overloaded. 2 crew members were injured. Nothing serious, but they needed attention. Her voice was calm, professional, like she was discussing a minor maintenance issue, not the aftermath of a battle that should have killed them all. Jake stood up. He told Peter to take the command. They needed to board the Eternal Grace and clear out any Krell that had already gotten inside. Kelrath found his voice. He said he was coming with them. Jake looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. They gathered in the airlock. 20 humans in combat armor. Kelrath had thought the humans looked big before. In armor, they looked massive. Like walking tanks. Each one carried weapons that seemed too large. Too heavy. But they handled them like toys. Jake handed Kelrath a small pistol. Showed him how to use it. Told him to stay behind them and only fire if something got past them. The Valiant star docked with the Eternal Grace. The airlock cycled. They moved into the colony ship. Kelrath had been on ships like this before. Usually they were peaceful. Full of families and laughter. Children playing. Adults discussing their new home. But now the corridors were dark. Emergency lights cast everything in red. And there was silence. The wrong kind of silence. Peter took point. His weapon was up and ready. The other humans spread out. They moved without speaking, hand signals and tiny gestures. They flowed through the corridors like water. Kelrath tried to keep up. His breath was loud in his helmet. His heart hammered. The humans made no sound at all. They found the first bodies in Corridor 7. 3 Vexians, colonists, one was a child. Kelrath's vision blurred. He wanted to stop, to mourn, but the humans kept moving. There would be time for grief later. Now there was only time for action. The Krell had gathered in the main living section. Kelrath could hear them through the walls. Their harsh voices, their cruel laughter. They were hurting the survivors, taking what they wanted. Kelrath thought of his sister, of her children. Rage filled him, hot and sharp. He had never felt anything like it before. Jake held up his hand. The humans stopped. He pointed to different people, assigned positions. They moved silently to their places. Kelrath stayed next to Amy. The doctor had a rifle in her hands. She handled it with the same competence she showed with medical equipment. She caught him looking and gave him a small smile. Her eyes were not smiling, though. They were cold. Peter counted down on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. Then he kicked open the door. The humans moved like a single organism. They flowed into the room. The Krell had no time to react. They were big, covered in armor, armed, but the humans were faster. Kelrath saw Lisa drop to one knee and fire. Saw her shot take a Krell in the throat right above his armor. Saw him fall. Danny moved left. His weapon barked 3 times. 3 Krell went down. Greg went right. His shots were just as precise. The Krell tried to organize, tried to fight back, but they were used to fighting civilians. Frightened merchants, unarmed colonists. They were not ready for humans. A Krell warrior grabbed a Vexian child, held her in front of him like a shield. Kelrath's breath caught. The warrior shouted something, demanded the humans lower their weapons. The child was crying, terrified. The Krell's claws were at her throat. Lisa shifted her position. Kelrath did not see her aim, did not see her line up the shot. He just saw the result. The Krell's head snapped back. The child fell. Jake was already there, caught her before she hit the ground, handed her to Amy. His movements were gentle, careful, like the battle around him was not happening. The fight lasted less than 2 minutes. 15 Krell dead, not wounded, not captured, dead. The humans swept through the room checking bodies, making sure. They were thorough, professional. When it was done, Peter reported all clear. His voice was steady. The survivors emerged from where they had been hiding. Over 100 Vexians. They stared at the humans with wide eyes. Some were injured. All were traumatized. They saw the bodies, saw the weapons, saw the armor, and they were afraid. Not of the Krell anymore. Of their rescuers. Kelrath stepped forward, pulled off his helmet, let them see his face, told them they were safe, that these humans were friends, that they had come to help. The Vexians looked uncertain. A human had just killed 15 Krell warriors in 2 minutes. What stopped them from killing Vexians too? Jake stepped forward. He removed his helmet. His face was sweaty, tired, but he smiled. The same friendly smile Kelrath had seen on the station. He spoke in careful Vexian, told them his name, told them they were going to be okay, told them his people would get them medical care, food, water, safety. His voice was gentle, patient, nothing like the voice that had ordered weapons free. A small Vexian child broke away from her mother. She ran to Jake, threw her arms around his leg, started crying. Jake knelt down, put his huge armored hand on her small back, made soothing sounds. The humans around him lowered their weapons. Amy moved forward with her medical kit. Greg joined her. They started treating the wounded with gentle hands. Kelrath searched the crowd. His eyes scanned faces, looking, hoping, praying. Then he saw her, Marin, his sister. She was holding her children close, protecting them. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn, but she was alive. They were alive. He ran to her, grabbed her, held her tight. She sobbed into his shoulder. Her children clung to both of them. They were a knot of relief and fear and joy. Kelrath looked over his sister's head, looked at the humans. They were moving through the survivors, helping, healing, speaking softly, being gentle, but he could still see the bodies, could still see how fast they had moved, how precise their shots had been, how cold their eyes had been during the fight. And he understood something that terrified him. The humans could choose. They could be gentle or they could be lethal. And they could switch between the two in a heartbeat. That was what made them dangerous. Not that they could kill, but that they could kill and then comfort a crying child without missing a beat. The humans worked through the eternal grace like they had done this 1,000 times before. Greg set up a medical station in the mess hall. Amy helped him organize supplies. They moved efficiently, knew exactly what to do. When a Vexian child cried from pain as Amy treated a broken arm, she spoke softly, told stories about Earth, about animals called dogs that were loyal and friendly. The child stopped crying and listened, fascinated despite everything. Danny and Lisa went through the ship checking for more Krell. They found 3 trying to steal supplies from the cargo bay. Kelrath heard the brief exchange of weapons fire. Then silence. The humans returned 5 minutes later. Did not talk about what happened. Just reported the ship was clear. Jake coordinated everything from the bridge. He was in contact with the Valiant star, with the station, with the approaching Vexian military ships. His voice was calm as he explained the situation. Requested medical supplies. Arranged for the damaged colony ship to be towed. Made it sound like this was routine. Like he did not just fight and win against impossible odds. Kelrath sat with his sister and her children. Marin held her youngest daughter close. The girl was only 6 standard years. She had seen things no child should see. Her eyes were distant, shocked. Her son was older. 10 years. He kept asking questions. Where were the Krell? Were they gone? Were more coming? Kelrath tried to answer, tried to sound confident, but his voice shook. Peter walked over. The big human knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. He spoke slowly in careful Vexian. Said the Krell were gone, said they would not come back, said his team had checked every corridor and every room and the ship was safe. The boy looked at him with wide eyes. Asked how Peter could be sure. Peter smiled. It was a gentle smile. He said because if any Krell were left, his team would have found them. And anything his team found would not be a threat anymore. It should have sounded like a boast. But Peter said it like a simple fact. Like explaining that water was wet or space was cold. The boy nodded slowly, seemed to accept this. Kelrath watched and wondered how a human could be so frightening and so reassuring at the same time. The Vexian military arrived 4 hours later. 3 warships, big, modern, well-armed. Everything the Eternal Grace needed hours ago. Their commanders contacted Jake immediately. Demanded to know what happened. Who authorized the human ship to engage. why they did not wait for proper military support. Kelrath listened to Jake's response. The human commander was polite but firm. He explained the situation, the timeline, the threat. He said he made the call based on the information available. He said he would submit a full report. His tone made it clear he would do it again. The Vexian commanders did not seem to know how to respond to that. Senior diplomat Threxus arrived with the fleet. He boarded the Eternal Grace and toured the damage. Saw the bodies, saw the survivors, saw the humans working among them. His face was hard to read. He found Kelrath and asked for a private word. They stood in an empty corridor. Threxus looked old, tired. He asked Kelrath what he saw. What really happened? Kelrath tried to find words, tried to explain. But how could he? How could he make Threxus understand that humans fought like nothing he had ever seen? That they moved with precision and purpose? That they killed without hesitation when needed? That they were gentle with survivors moments later? Threxus listened. His face grew more serious with each word. He asked if Kelrath was saying humans were dangerous. Kelrath thought about that. About Jake's smile. About Amy treating children. About Peter reassuring a frightened boy. About the way they had charged into battle without fear. He said humans were not dangerous. They were terrifying. Because they chose when to be dangerous. That was what made them different. The diplomat nodded slowly. Said he would need to report this to the Confederation. That this changed everything about how they viewed humanity. Kelrath asked what he meant. Threxus said the galaxy thought humans were young. New. Weak. One small species just starting to explore space. But a species that could do what the Valiant star did, that could fight like the humans fought, that was not weak. Over the next 2 days, they transferred survivors to the Vexian ships, made sure everyone had medical care. The Eternal Grace was too damaged to repair easily. It would be towed back to Vexian space. The colonists would need to start over. But they were alive. That was what mattered. Kelrath watched his sister and her children board the transport. Marin hugged him tight. Whispered thanks, not just to him, to the humans. She said she would never forget what they did. Her children waved goodbye to Amy. The doctor had spent hours with them, playing games, telling stories, helping them process their trauma. They adored her. Could not see the same person who had moved through combat with a rifle in her hands. The humans prepared to return to the station. Their ship had damage, scorch marks on the hull. A destroyed shield generator, minor issues everywhere, but it was functional. Kevin ran diagnostics while Claire supervised repairs. They worked without complaint, without asking for recognition. Just did their jobs. Jake found Kelrath in the observation deck. The human looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. He had not slept much, too busy coordinating everything. But he still smiled when he saw Kelrath, asked how his sister was doing, if she needed anything. Kelrath wanted to ask so many questions, wanted to understand. How could Jake be the same person who ordered the destruction of that Krell ship, who watched it explode without emotion, who led his crew into a fight they should not have won? How could that person be the same one who now asked about Marin with genuine concern? Instead, he asked something simpler. Asked how humans learned to fight like that. Jake was quiet for a long moment, looked out at the stars. Then he started talking. About Earth, about their history. He said humans had been at war for most of their existence. Not because they wanted to be, but because their world was harsh and resources were limited, and survival was never guaranteed. He said they learned to fight or die, to adapt or perish, to work together or fall apart. He said every major civilization on Earth had risen through conflict and fallen through it too. He said humans understood violence in a way most species did not. Because they had lived with it for hundreds of thousands of years. It was part of them. In their blood. In their bones, but he said something else too. Said that same history taught them the cost of violence. The price of war. He said humans knew that fighting should be the last option, not the first. That violence solved some problems but created others. That peace was hard to build but easy to destroy. He said that was why humans tried so hard to be peaceful, because they knew what happened when they were not. Kelrath listened and tried to understand. On Vex, the world had been gentle. Resources were plentiful. Competition was limited. The Vexians evolved in harmony. They learned cooperation because it was easy, because it made sense. But humans Humans learned cooperation despite everything working against it. They chose peace when war was natural. That was what made them different. Jake looked at him directly, said he knew the Vexians would be afraid now, would look at humans differently, would see them as a threat. He said he could not change that. His crew did what they had to do, saved who they could save. He said he hoped the Vexians would understand, would see that humans fought for others, not against them. Kelrath wanted to reassure him, but he could not. Because Jake was right, the Vexians would be afraid. The whole Confederation would be afraid, because they had seen what humans could do, had seen one small ship defeat 3 larger ones, had seen 20 humans clear a ship of Krell warriors in minutes, had seen them switch between killer and caretaker like flipping a switch. That kind of capability was frightening, no matter how noble the intention. But Kelrath also knew something else. Knew that the Krell were still out there, that other threats existed, that the galaxy was not always a safe place, and he knew that having humans as friends was better than having them as enemies. Much better. He said as much to Jake. The human commander smiled, said he hoped the rest of the Confederation would see it that way too. They returned to the station. The Valiant star docked and the crew disembarked. They looked tired, ready for rest, but there was something else in their eyes. Satisfaction, maybe. They had done their job, saved lives, stopped the bad guys. For them it was just another day, but for Kelrath it was the day everything changed, the day he learned what humans really were, not the friendly, curious people he had observed for weeks. Not just that, but also warriors, protectors, capable of incredible violence in service of incredible compassion. It was a combination that should not work, but somehow in humans it did. The station felt different after the rescue. The corridors were the same. The lighting had not changed. The gravity was still heavy, but something intangible had shifted. When Vexian personnel saw humans now, they looked away quickly. Conversations stopped when Jake or his crew walked past. Fear had crept into the peaceful exchange program. Kelrath saw it happen, watched as his own people withdrew. They were polite still, professional. But the easy friendship was gone, replaced by wariness, by the knowledge of what humans could do when pushed. He tried to bridge the gap, tried to explain to other Vexians that the humans saved lives, that they were heroes. But words felt hollow when images of destroyed Krell ships filled the reports. He spent more time in the observation deck. Found it easier to think there. The stars were constant, unchanging. They did not care about politics or fear or the complicated nature of humans. He was there 3 days after the rescue when Amy found him. She carried 2 cups of coffee, handed him one without asking. They stood in silence for a while. Watching the cosmos, Amy spoke first. Her voice was soft. She said she knew the Vexians were afraid, said she understood why. She told him about Earth history, about the world wars, about weapons that could destroy entire cities, about how humans had nearly wiped themselves out several times. She said her own species feared what they could do, that every human child learned about the dangers of unchecked violence. She said that was why they tried so hard to be better, why they reached for the stars, why they wanted to meet other species and learn from them, because humans knew their capacity for destruction, and they wanted to prove they could be more than that, could create instead of destroy, could help instead of hurt. Kelrath asked if she was ever afraid of what she could do, of what her species could do. Amy was quiet. Then she nodded, said she was terrified sometimes, that during the fight on the Eternal Grace she had moved on instinct, training, years of preparation. But afterward, when she held those Vexian children, when she saw their fear, she wondered if they would ever feel safe around humans again. He told her that her patients asked about her, that the children wanted to know if she would visit them, that his sister spoke of Amy with gratitude and warmth. Amy smiled, but her eyes were sad. She said it was good they remembered the help, but they would also remember the violence. Both things were true. Both things were human. Jake joined them eventually. He looked better, had slept, had eaten. The dark circles under his eyes were fading. He stood between them and looked out at space. Did not say anything for a long time. Just stood there, present. Kelrath broke the silence. Asked what would happen now. Jake said he did not know. Said reports were being filed. Decisions were being made above his pay grade. The Vexian Confederation was meeting, debating, discussing what humanity meant for galactic politics. whether they were allies or threats or something in between. He said it was out of his hands, but he also said his crew would keep doing their job. Keep being stationed here. Keep learning from the Vexians. Keep being themselves. He said they could not change what happened, could only move forward, hope that people would judge them by their full actions, not just the violent parts. Over the following weeks, Kelrath filed his reports. Long detailed observations about human nature. He wrote about their capacity for violence, but also their capacity for compassion. He wrote about their loyalty, their courage, their willingness to sacrifice for others. He tried to paint a complete picture, tried to make his superiors understand. The Confederation response came slowly, first through official channels, diplomatic language that said very little, but Kelrath could read between the lines. The humans had frightened the Vexian leadership, made them reconsider everything, made them realize that this young species was not weak, was not harmless, was something new in the galaxy. But there were other responses too. Messages from Marin, from other survivors, from Vexians who had been saved. They wrote to Kelrath, asked him to pass along their thanks, their gratitude, said they wanted the humans to know they were appreciated, that their bravery mattered, that they were heroes regardless of how frightening they could be. Kelrath shared these messages with Jake, watched the human commander read them, saw his face soften, saw relief in his eyes. Jake said this meant more than official recognition, said knowing they made a difference was why his crew did what they did, why they put themselves at risk. The formal announcement came 6 weeks after the rescue. The Vexian Confederation was extending the cultural exchange program, expanding it. They wanted more humans on Vexian stations, more joint operations, more cooperation. It was carefully worded, diplomatic, but the meaning was clear. The Vexians wanted humans as allies, despite the fear. Because of the fear, maybe, there was a ceremony, official, formal. The Confederation awarded the crew of the Valiant Star their highest civilian honor, the Star of Salvation, given to those who risked everything to save Vexian lives. Jake accepted on behalf of his crew, gave a short speech, thanked the Confederation for the honor, said his people were proud to stand with the Vexians, to be friends, to be allies. Kelrath stood in the crowd and watched, saw the way the humans held themselves, proud but not arrogant, honored but not boastful. They were good at this, at being humble despite their capabilities, at making others feel safe despite being dangerous. It was another contradiction, another impossibility that humans made work. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Vexians and humans mingled. The atmosphere was still cautious but warming. People talked, shared stories. Some Vexians even laughed at human jokes. Progress, slow but real. Danny told one of his terrible jokes. A Vexian scientist groaned but smiled. The ice was melting. Kelrath found himself talking to Peter, the quiet human who had reassured his nephew. They discussed tactics, strategies. Peter explained human military thinking, how they trained, how they prepared. He said the key was never wanting to fight, but always being ready if fighting became necessary. Said the best warriors were the ones who avoided war, but won quickly when war found them. It made sense to Kelrath, fit with what he had observed. Humans did not seek violence, but they did not shy from it either. They accepted it as a tool, last resort, terrible but sometimes necessary. It was a mature view, balanced. He said as much to Peter. The human smiled, said it took humans a long time to learn that balance, cost them millions of lives, cost them centuries of pain, but they learned. As the reception wound down, Jake approached Kelrath, said he had a question, a request. Kelrath nodded. Jake said the Confederation was offering permanent ambassadorial positions. Vexians who would work with human delegations, help bridge the cultural gap, help both species understand each other. He asked if Kelrath would consider it. Kelrath was surprised. He was just a junior xenobiologist, barely qualified for the initial observation mission. Surely there were better candidates, more experienced diplomats, more qualified specialists. He said as much. Jake shook his head, said Kelrath had been there, had seen humans at their worst and their best, had seen the violence and the compassion, had experienced both sides. That made him perfect for the job, made him someone who could explain humans to Vexians who had not seen what he had seen, who could help them understand the complete picture. More than that, Jake said Kelrath had stood with them, had boarded his ship, had gone into danger, had trusted them. That meant something. That built a foundation. Jake said he wanted someone he could trust as the liaison, someone who understood. Kelrath thought about it, about his comfortable life on Vex Prime, about his research, about the quiet academic existence he had planned. Then he thought about Marin, about those children on the Eternal Grace, about the way Jake had comforted that crying girl while wearing combat armor, about Amy treating the wounded with gentle hands, about Peter reassuring his nephew, about humans and everything they represented. He said yes. Of course he said yes. How could he not? Because the galaxy needed to understand humans, needed to see them clearly, needed to know that they were not monsters, not threats, but they were dangerous, incredibly dangerous. And that was okay, because they were dangerous in defense of others, dangerous when protecting the innocent, dangerous when stopping cruelty, that kind of danger the galaxy needed. 3 months later, Kelrath stood on the observation deck of a new station, larger than the last, jointly built by Vexians and humans, a symbol of cooperation, of alliance, of something new in the galaxy. The construction crews worked together now, Vexian engineers and human technicians, learning from each other, building together. He wrote his final log entry, the one that would be filed in the Confederation archives, the one that future Vexians would read when trying to understand the early days of human contact. He chose his words carefully, wanted them to be accurate, wanted them to be fair, wanted them to be complete. He wrote about the day he stood with humans, about how he came face to face with real terror, not because humans were evil, but because they were capable, because they could inflict terrible violence when necessary, because they did not hesitate when lives were at stake, because they were forged in a crucible of conflict that most species could not imagine. But he also wrote about their compassion, their loyalty, their willingness to sacrifice for strangers,